Good morning. We're heading into hearing a little later this morning, so I just wanted to share with you. It's one of those more unusual cases where there was an award on, I think it was reconsideration, and the claimant opted to appeal it. And we have another video, I think, on this whole concept of getting an award on initial, but it's not where they say, oh, yes, we agree you're disabled back to when you said you were, but when we said you were, which was yesterday. And because it was yesterday, you don't really get paid for another 4 months because you have to have full 5 months unpaid under the waiting period for Social Security disability insurance. So we'll start paying you your monthlies in, say, February of 2023. And you either appeal it and take the risk of them relooking at it and being like, oh, no, not disabled at all, or you eat it. Now, in many of these cases, a person who is firmly of the personal knowledge that they were unable to do certainly their prior work. And if they were over 50, that might be one of the few critical factors to determine if they are disabled, because they don't necessarily have to go take a job that is still physically doable, but very different from what they used to do. So that's all a very oversimplistic way of the grids. So what do you do when the SSA said, well, we find you disabled once you turned a certain age, but not before, and you just turned that certain age. So those years before, we're not paying you for, because then the different grid rules applied. There were grid rules, but not much. And you didn't prove you could only do sedentary work. You only proved you could do light work. You weren't limited to sedentary. So that's where the appeal comes up. Because of the very low risk, if there's no untoward behaviors at the administrative level, which we wouldn't expect there to be, it seemed like an extremely low risk appeal, because normally we go into the whole risk appeal business, it could be overturned, in this case, that would be aberrational. So I wouldn't foresee that. But the big argument is this person was limited to sedentary work 3 years ago, as well as 1 year ago. So it wasn't just on the person's birthday where the higher level of light could find him disabled. He was sedentary then, and still is, of course. And that would be an exertional limitation. That's where we had a recent video about exertional versus non-exertional. These exertionals have to be hit up first, but then to close a lot of the gap, you need to have the non-exertionals. Tons of those here too. So anyway, we are heading in later this morning. High hopes, but it's always very nerve-wracking, because the results will be either $80,000, $90,000 to this person who hasn't been able to work in 2.5 years, or not. And of course, that aberrational risk of, oh, I don't think you're even disabled, reversing everything. So it is nerve-wracking. I mean, I supported the appeal after explaining the risks, because I really think it would be really impossible to find this person not limited to light. However, the fact is, he is limited to sedentary. Person could not be on their feet 6 hours a day, day after day after day, for months on end, without going out of his mind. I mean, the pain would just vamp up. So there is that. Also, lifting 20 pounds, on and off all day long would be far too much. But anyway, so we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed, prayers, all that good stuff. And any of you considering doing an appeal of a partially favorable award, it's really a heavy thing to consider. You would definitely want to weigh the factors behind how much did they stick you with not collecting. Look at the evidence and the reasons as to why they picked the date. In this case, it was a birth date, and look to see if there is strong evidence of a lower exertional level prior to that date. Again, this is particularly so with the over 50 crowd, guys. I hate to say it to the under 50 crowd, you guys have it tough, as you know. I mean, getting the win at all, it is probably something you should just be like, okay, dodged a bullet. Okay, not always, but you know, generally speaking. Anyway, I just wanted to share the morning, and I'm about to hop on and have a little. We have discussions all the time, me and my client, and we already had our pre-hearing prep, the long one. But I like to touch base right beforehand, and that is that time now. So I'll be going to go chat with him. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey, so if the subject matter of the video you just listened to is of interest and you want more on it, stay tuned. Here's another one about the same topic, but a little bit different. Bye now. Good afternoon. Okay, just to answer a few questions about the difference between exertional and non-exertional limitations. Generally, we get this information from a section called DI 245. Oops, let me do that again. 24515.063, exertional and non-exertional limitations. So let's just scope down here so you can get a gist of what they're talking about. They talk about impairments and related symptoms such as pain that cause limitations in your functioning or restrictions which limit you in your ability to meet certain job demands. Sometimes the limitations are exertional, sometimes they're non-exertional, and sometimes it's a combination of two. I'd say most of the time, most of us have a combination of two. As I say to my whatever aged older person who claims to only have one physical thing wrong that they're filing under, they think they're supposed to be filing under an impairment. That's not the case. And I'll say, so every other body part you have, it's like you were when you were 20, huh? Wow, that's impressive at 58. I wish I could say the same thing. Anyhow, all those things matter. And of course, as do any kind of mental health limitations, which would also be relevant. So if something is exertional, if it affects your ability to meet the strength demands of jobs, they explain how they get it from the DOL, the Department of Labor, United States Department of Labor's classification of jobs, which they do by the very exertions. And we've gone through this before in other video: sedentary, light, medium, heavy, and very heavy. In terms of the strength demands for sitting, standing, walking, lifting, carrying, pushing, and pulling, those things all get categorized within those exertional levels. So that's all the strength demands, basically, the exertionals. Scrolling down. I want to see if they explain exertional in any way different in their next little narrative here. They do say this about exertional. If the limitations and restrictions imposed by your impairments and related symptoms, such as pain, affect only your ability to meet the strength demands of jobs, and again, that would be sitting, standing, walking, lifting, carrying, pushing, pulling, we consider that you have only exertional limits. When your impairments and related symptoms only impose exertional limitations and your specific vocational profile is listed in a rule contained in the DI 25025.001, we will directly apply that rule to decide if you're disabled. Again, that is the grids, guys. So the grids are largely about the exertional. Now, if you have both exertional and non-exertional, you're definitely going to have your exertionals considered under the grids, of course. But if that doesn't work, then you can also have the rest of them considered too under the other ways of doing that. And the non-exertionals can also affect the ability to transfer your skills and adjust to other work. Okay, so let's get into the non-exertionals. The exertionals is what everyone's kind of used to, but the non-exertionals are massive, massive, super, super important. So they go on to say about the non-exertionals, when the limitations and restrictions imposed by your impairments and related symptoms, such as pain, affect only your ability to meet the demands of jobs other than the strength demands, and that's for those things that we noted above, we consider that you have only non-exertional limitations or restrictions. Some examples of non-exertional limitations or restrictions include the following. First one they note is you have difficulty functioning because you are nervous, anxious, or depressed. So there's mental health non-exertional limitations. First on their list. Now remember, you can't generally, unless you meet a listing, you're likely not going to prevail on that alone. Okay, it's got to be really severe, with the exception possibly of some gritting out folks. But then again, then it wouldn't be alone, would it? It would be with exertionals. The second one, you have difficulty maintaining attention or concentration. Third one, you have difficulty understanding or remembering detailed instructions. The fourth one, you have difficulty in seeing or hearing. The fifth one, you have difficulty tolerating some physical features of certain work settings. For example, you cannot tolerate dust or fumes. Or lastly, you have difficulty performing the manipulative or postural functions of some work, such as reaching, handling, stooping, climbing, crawling, or crouching. That could presumably also be fingering, handling, things affected by slow-moving wrists and fingers. If your impairments and related symptoms, such as pain, only affect your ability to perform the non-exertional aspects of work-related activities, then the rules that I noted above in DI 25025.001 do not direct factual conclusions of disabled or not disabled. The determination as to whether the disability exists will be based on the principles in the appropriate sections of the regulations, giving consideration to the rules for specific case situations found elsewhere. So that would primarily be developing that RFC, residual functional capacity, and seeing if there are any jobs that can be done given your reduced RFC. They give a little blurb about the combined exertional and non-exertional limitations. When the limitations and restrictions imposed by your impairments and related symptoms, such as pain, affect your ability to meet both the strength demands of jobs other than the strength demands, meet both the strength and demands of other jobs other than, this doesn't make sense. It does, but this is kind of long. Other than the strength demands, we consider that you have a combination of exertional and non-exertional restrictions. If your impairments and related symptoms such as pain affect your ability to meet both the strength and demands of jobs other than the strength demands, we will not directly apply the rules in the grids unless there is a rule that directs a conclusion that you are disabled based on your strength limitations. Otherwise, the rules provide a framework to guide our decision. So again, if they can find you gridded out on your exertional, that's all you need. But that is often not the case. So you really have to use those other non-exertional factors. We push for people to really follow up with those. They're often the things that we don't follow up on because they're not what took us out of our last job. They're not the thing necessarily that causes us the worst pain. If we have arthritis in our fingers, but we don't have to use our fingers very much, and it only really strikes if we use them for more than 5 minutes. But we don't tend to do that. We just do little things around the house because we're not working now, because we got booted because of our big bad exertional limitation that took us out of our job. Those fingers could very well be the thing that ends up clinching your case. Hard to explain in a video, but it is so. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Exertional and non-exertional. Okay, the exertionals, those big broad topics of sitting, standing, walking, etc., and everything else is largely non-exertional. I'll talk to you later. Bye.